So let's talk about coaching. Let's actually kind of go through. I'd love to hear more about like breaking this kind of down step by step that as somebody comes to you and kind of walking us through about this entire journey. So what advice would you give to somebody? Perhaps they're hesitant, they're on the fence, they're starting to think about this. What are the first steps that you would actually give to somebody who wants to try to be able to make this type of change, this type of transition?
Yeah, and people who know me, so people who are listening to this, they know exactly what I'm about to say. Well, actually, I'm going to say one thing that might not be what people are expecting, but the second thing people are definitely expecting. The first thing is making sure that L&D is actually what you want to do. So I think a lot of people get to a point where they're told, especially educators. I know you probably have a lot of educators listening to your podcast, whether K through 12, higher ed, everything in between. I like to say that there was a bad game of telephone that started like late 2019, early 2020, which told educators that their only way out of the classroom was to become instructional designers. And so what happens is then people think, oh, my only way out is to be an instructional designer, or even we can be more broad, right? To be in learning and development. But there are so many skills that you can utilize that are transferable into L&D, but also transferable outside of L&D. I've had people come to me who thinking they want to be in L&D and realize they want to be in marketing, realize they want to be in sales. And the process is still always going to be the same. My process works across industries. I just focus on L&D. And so I think first step is like, do I actually want to be in L&D, or did someone tell me I should be in L&D? So really figuring that piece out. That can be a little tricky, but when you're like, oh, okay, L&D sounds pretty good, then I'll say, so that's like point A. But the first true step, once you figured out that L&D is for you, is to identify your L&D niche. So everyone's like, duh, we knew she was going to say that. If you know me, you know I'm going to say that. And your niche is the intersection between your skills, your interests, and your values, right? So most people, what they do is they say, okay, I want to be in L&D. Great, here's some jobs, just some job descriptions, some job titles. I'm going to pick a job title, and that's what I'm going to go with. But the way L&D works, as well as every other industry, is there's no standardization, right? So you could pull 3 instructional designer jobs right now, as you probably know. All 3 will have 3 different job descriptions essentially, but they're all called instructional designer. And so what happens is people can get really stuck on these titles. So what I say is forget the titles, find your L&D niche, the intersection between the transferable skills you have, the interests that you actually want to do and explore in your next role, as well as the values that you want to share with your next company. And really what you do is once you figure that out, then your output, which is what I call your niche statement, is being able to articulate what it is you want to do, how you want to do it, and for who you want to do it for. And rather than you trying to fit into every other box that's out there, right? I'm going to fit into this instructional design box. I'm going to fit into this learning experience designer box. I'm going to fit into this training specialist box. You're creating your own box and you're saying, oh, this job and this job description fits in my box. That job description doesn't fit into my box. And so you get to be really, really aligned with the roles that you apply to and the roles that are right for you. So first step, besides figuring out if L&D is right for you, if you decide it is, figuring out what your L&D niche is, that will be your North Star throughout the entire process.
I love that. Now, are there certain types of, as you mentioned about like basically triangulation of the data is like the nerd in me was just like, oh, you do that. And that's really interesting to hear about your philosophy with that. Are there certain types of key qualities that if somebody says like, hey, Sarah, I just did what you just asked me to do with this exercise and I've been able to identify, X, Y, and Z, that you're like, yes, that makes sense. You should be pursuing this field. Or is there something that they might say and you're like, actually, no, that quality might be best served, as you said, in marketing or within IT or customer support or something along those lines?
Yeah, that happens. I mean, I have a client right now who is in my group program who in doing all of this realized that she also has a love for marketing. And so one of the conversations we had was, do you want to go into marketing with a learning lens, or do you want to go into learning with a marketing lens, right? So you get to choose. We were actually having a conversation about this morning too. And so it's really the beauty of your niche statement is that it's yours, right? Your niche is yours. So you get to decide that. And so that's also, I think, why having a coach is important, because I can ask that question. I can say, hey, when you think about what's next for you and the impact you want to have, right? Is that in a marketing role, but you know that a lot of marketing is training people, right? Like that's really what marketing is. Or is it training and learning that you want to be in, but we know that really good learning has to be marketed, right? So you get to decide. And ultimately she said, I really want to be in learning, but I want to bring that marketing lens into it. And so that was really helpful for us to have that conversation and for me to ask those questions of her and let her reflect on that too. So occasionally that happens. I would say for the most part, when people get to me, they're pretty sure that learning is for them. However, most people, when they get to me, they've picked a job title, and that's the rewiring of the brain that we need to do more than like, is L&D right for me?